Welcome, everybody, to the show. It's been a year, and today we are reviewing the year. Welcome, Jacob.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well, and I thought it would be interesting to cover the year. Now, that's impossible. This has been um, a really great discussion, ongoing discussion about teaching. And I thought we would tackle it like this. I thought we would talk about some of the episodes that we've started implementing. So there were many great episodes. In fact, there's many great episodes we're not going to cover because, what is it now? 130, 25? I don't remember how many episodes we have, but I will just ask you, which of the episodes have you started percolating over, using in the classroom, really influenced you? And you could ask me the same. I'll also ask you about the movie that kind of sort of hit you the hardest in terms of your teaching strategy. And also we'll talk about books. And let's just run with it. Let's roll. How does that sound to you?
Sounds perfect. All right.
So let me ask you, what episode stands out to you in terms of impact in your classroom? What would you like to talk about?
Yes, I would say, going back in time here a little bit, Wade and Helen Harlan. That one we've talked about several times. We've had Wade back, I think, at least one more time after the initial time. And it was reading to your class, reading out loud, right? And I've been doing that more. I do some short stories, short pieces throughout the semester. I just did a unit on the 1920s Harlem Renaissance, and Zora Hurston is one of my favorite writers from that time, and Langston Hughes. So she had a great short story called Sweat, and I read that to the class. It's a very difficult read, and but I read it because I knew they would have a difficult time with it. But then we were able to analyze it and talk about it. So I've been doing quite a bit of that, and I'm always thinking about Wade, that episode, because he brought that up and how he and his wife did that with his children, and he's done that, and it's just only helped their home, and even getting excited to read, to want to read. And I think that's one of the things that we want to do, right, Ruben, is to hopefully the students will enjoy the piece of literature that you're bringing to the class, and that they'll say, hey, I want to do this on my own time. I want to read for pleasure. And so that's one of the episodes I would say that I've really tried to implement in my class. What about you, Ruben? What's the first one that pops out in your head? The implementation.
I was going to say that one too. And so I think I have to say that, and just so readers, watchers can understand the background, a couple of things that they mentioned in there that were very interesting were that, for example, one of I believe their son, when he was in 7th grade, scored at an 8th grade level in science in the some kind of Iowa State test, right. And Wade and Helen homeschool their kids. They were concerned because that next year they didn't cover science. So they thought, oh no, what's going to happen with our son? But that next year he scored a college age level in science because they, kind of encouraged his reading so deeply, so much that he became a serious reader. And he was an independent reader without prodding from them. So, and the other thing that they talked about is associating. So the data is there, by the way. The data, we talked about how the best SAT prep course is reading to your children and having that as a regular practice. But we also, I like what they mentioned in associating pleasure with reading. So I really, I constantly think that And sometimes you don't have the classroom to kind of lend itself easily to that. So that pushes your creativity. I've brought in some cool little, really comfortable chairs and things and rugs in my room. And I've tried to associate reading with pleasure. I brought in any book that I could find. And it really has influenced my thinking, because now when a student is reading and I interrupt them to give them what I want to give them, I don't do it that comfortably. I don't do it comfortably to just stop them from reading. And there have been a couple of times I let them just read. There are times when a student said, "Can I just keep reading?" And I said, "Yes." Well, I started doing something else with the rest of the class, because they're doing the most important work. Really good episode. I agree with you. And let's go to another episode. What would you like to say?
Kimberly Parker came on not too long ago, and she's an art teacher at a school I used to work at in Cudahy. And I thought it was a wonderful discussion. A couple of things stood out to me, and I started thinking, how can I implement it? One was her classes to me, and I don't think you've ever been to her home, Ruben, but her home, her classroom, it's like an art museum. And she puts pieces up that she doesn't throw things on the wall just to throw them up. There's time where she thinks about it. She knows what she's putting up, and it's intentional. And so I've been thinking about this for so long, and I started putting pieces up. I have a couple pieces of art on my walls. And I know I'm not an art teacher, but it brings great discussion with the kids. His history, as I'm a history teacher, but I just put a Diego Rivera that my father owned into my classroom. And we had some great discussions about that. And so having a room where you can actually express yourself at the same time, they really become learning walls. And so that's something that I've been trying to implement. The second thing is, when she was on the episode, I had to go back and look at it a couple of times, because she is a true teacher. Just her love for the subject. She loved talking. At one moment in the episode, she talked about Michelangelo, and how that was her favorite artist. But she goes into it, like why he's her favorite. And then she goes into the art piece of David, right? And the Sistine Wall, and Sistine Chapel, and the ceiling. And so she goes piece by piece, and why she enjoys that. And I'm not sure if you agree, Ruben, but I felt like we were being taught, and we didn't even know it. It was just happening. It just happened so naturally. And yeah. I just thought, wow, it's a love for subject. And B, she was so articulate. So I'm really trying to convey my love when I go over a topic, just let the kids know I love this stuff. And if I bring that out, I'm hoping they're going to say, you know what, he likes it. It must be something. And hopefully they'll enjoy the topic as well, or whatever unit we're covering at the moment.
There was a moment in the Kim Parker interview where she says something to the effect of, my classroom is my art. And do you remember this?
Yeah, I do.
And so I think it's a really interesting idea, because if you do any kind of art, it's real personal to you. It's something that you want to get better at. It's something that's meaningful. And it's not just a job, or it's something that you do to get paid. It's something that is unique to you, and you nurture it. And you could really see that in her personality and how she treats people. And I recommend it. I mean, it's your recommendation, but I like what you're saying. I do want to, I guess the idea, people, is that we're picking 3 each.
It's tough.
But
yeah,
it is tough. But the next one I wanted to talk about is our interview with Sonia Tovar.
Oh yeah.
And she had mentioned several things that I think have been something that have been very meaningful to me. I try to keep it in practice, at least 1 or 2 things, but there's a third thing that I found cool. One of these things is the idea of not majoring in teaching, or majoring or learning to teach. If you become a teacher, that is, but you learn a skill, or you major in a skill. And I think that's where teaching is going anyway. This idea that you're not just learning these subjects, some of which you won't use, but that you can really do something. Um, and so this is something I really consider when I teach now, because I'm thinking, well, why are we reading, and what are we writing, and why are we writing? So I'm considered, I've considered blogging, and we've done it, and YouTubing, and speaking in a very meaningful way so that they can create a product. They can think of really their learning as a participatory act that's going to benefit society and them. It's something that is an ongoing thing, I think, for me and perhaps other teachers to consider. Another thing that she mentioned is the dual immersion concept at her children's school. And that is a concept of students taking a language plus that language in a content area, or plus one content area in that language. So let me rephrase that. They take the language like Spanish or Chinese plus a content area in that language. And I thought, wow, that has to be done more often, because talk about learning that language. And so perhaps that's the secret, and many schools might be going in that direction, but who knows? And the other thing in general is the idea of teachers talking too much. It's very important to let them talk, let them read, let them engage, and sitting back. And sometimes that's not comfortable for a teacher, because we don't like dead air. We don't like silence sometimes, but sometimes that's when the students are doing the greatest work. They're working it out. They're waiting, they're percolating. And sometimes it's good to just not give the answer. And so I have really learned to practice that this year, last year, and it's an ongoing skill. So real good interview, a lot there.
Very cool.
Okay, so your turn.
Okay, yeah. The third one that, well, again, like you shared, Ruben, there's so many that have really had impact in our lives, and teaching, and in our school teaching, I should say, that part of our life. And Jessica Zwall came on a couple months ago, and she is a teacher, but now she's out of the classroom. She's had a couple different out of the classroom positions, and she's a representative of her union at her school, and she's been in different positions with that union as well, leadership positions. So she came on, and you know what? Right now, during this whole COVID period in education with masks and health, it just made me see things a little differently. Sometimes I make my prejudgments. So how it affected me was to listen more. And I was so encouraged to hear her share things regarding how at least her union was, and I think other unions as well, are looking for things regarding making sure the kids have access to water. I mean, it sounds so of course, but I think I mentioned in the episode that our students don't have easy access to water at my school. And so that's a concern. And also she mentioned how rooms would have a proper ventilation, and making sure that air is flowing properly, and that the filters are being changed, right? And so these are things that might sound minor, but they're really major, especially if you're spending, as you know, we spend hours in those rooms, and to not have that a situation where it's where we feel safe, where we feel secure. It's hard to work in a situation like that. We tell the kids all the time, our first job is to make sure that they're safe, and then we could teach them. If they don't feel safe or secure, then that's not going to happen. And if we as teachers don't feel that way, it's not going to happen. And so I think in the next few months, we're going to hear and see different things that are happening with the unions regarding negotiating, regarding even as we see things changing in the area of health and science and COVID. So I definitely just want to be a person who's more open. And I know you brought up, or I think it was you, or maybe I brought up regarding sometimes they have a bad rap, unions, regarding being too liberal. And she basically said there's a place for conservatives, at least in her union. And I felt secure in that, and I felt encouraged by that, because sometimes I question that. Is there a place for other thought, other points of opinion. And she basically said, yes, there is. And I believe her. And it was good to hear that, because it reminded me, I don't know it all, and I need to do my homework and see what's going on, even with our union, as they're getting ready to do a new contract, not just the financial part, but the health piece, even other personnel on campus that assist teachers and assist students, more importantly. But that was a really that probably was the one that educated me the most, Ruben.
Yes, I really liked her energy and spirit. There's something about her that really showed some empathy and her ability to listen. And no, she said, we're not one side politically. We listen. And I like that episode as well. The episode I want to say next, and then we're going to move on to perhaps books, but our recent interview with Nathan Howe, he demonstrated in that episode something I think that's very critical, and that is, if you have passion, you can go a long way with that passion in communicating to students. For example, do you and I know much about the Bruce Springsteen album Tunnel of Love, or the Brian Ferry or the Roxy Music album Avalon? No, but don't we want to now know more? Because he brought in such love and knowledge. He knew what he was talking about, from the producers to the arrangers to the food trucks that brought in lunch those days. I mean, and you wanted to hear it. You didn't know it, but you want it, because the guy can teach. He does it with passion and with love. And it reminds me, this is what I gotta not forget. Once you lose that love for it, then you might start thinking of retiring. And the other thing he did was that he didn't forget his humble background and his struggle as a student. And it informed his teaching and his empathy, and he never forgot it. And I think that's the key thing. Now, some of us don't have the same background, but we all knew what it was like to struggle at some point as a student. We can remember that. We all knew what it was like to have a teacher we didn't understand, or a subject we didn't understand at some point. So this was a really good episode. And I've seen him teach. I know what he is as an educator, and he's the real article for sure. And
Wasn't it great, Ruben, when he said, "Hey, I've gone into the classroom and have taught, for teachers."
He's an administrator now,
right?
And so what he said was, "I will go in and I will help a teacher who needs help by teaching the class myself." And then they see, I didn't know I didn't know that student was reachable.
Right.
Yes, that student is reachable. Maybe you just need to push this lever, so.
That was great.
There are so many episodes, and perhaps in our pod and review, we'll say, oops, what about that one? We did. There's so many, though, we could just discuss. Now, moving on to books, what book would you say you just received the most from? I guess it could be educationally or otherwise, but we read this year.
Right. Well, I think Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. It's a book I read. I must have read the first time when I was in my early 20s, but I looked at it differently this time. This was a man who was, by the time he wrote this book, I believe it was in the early 60s, right? Because while he was traveling, it was 1960. It was during the presidential election. So I think it was published like a year or two later. And so while he's traveling, his whole idea was to get to know people in America, the blue collar, the Americans that you just see at a coffee shop, right? And he did that. He went throughout the country. And I think for me, I love to travel. And it really got me going. Like, I want the places that you saw, and you mentioned like Milwaukee, and he went to the Yellowstone, and you're like, wow, these are places I want to go to, and I want to see, even where he's from, up north, right? From where we're California, but Northern California, where a lot of his books are written about, right? Like East of Eden and so forth, Cannery Row. But he, so by that, it, of course, excited me. And as a teacher, I'm not sure if I ever shared this with you, Ruben, but there were times when I used to teach about like Washington, D.C., and I would tell the kids, well, I've never been there. I know, talking about statues, it just doesn't get the power unless you see it and you go, you guys, the Statue of Liberty it was a lot smaller than I thought. I would share that with them. They're like, what? I go, it's big, but it's not crazy big. And so, but until you see it, and then of course, for my teaching, that's why I just was excited when I was hearing about his travels. But it was also interesting by the end of the book, he was ready to go home. He saw the South, which was really turned him off. And he was ready to get home to live his life. And I felt like he got it. He figured out, hey, you know what? I saw America. It's not perfect. And he saw a lot of people, everyday people that were just good people, good Americans, and people who really were living their life to the fullest, And so I enjoyed the book. Again, like I said, for my teaching, just to be like saying, hey, these are places I've traveled to. Let me tell you what I saw. Pictures are fine, but just that experience is precious, and it's priceless. How about you, Rube?
Yeah. Well, I want to also encourage people to read Travels with Charlie. It is a very good book, and I agree with that. I do love his take on preachers. It's what a passage, what a tough son of a gun John Steinbeck was, what a humble man to get in his little camper and get his dog on the, in the vehicle and say, I'm going to travel the country. This award-winning author, just as you keep reading it, you're thinking, this man is special. And his books are great. His books are so great. I also picked a Steinbeck book, not that one, but East of Eden, a book I've always wanted to read, and recommended by another episode that we could have talked about at length, which was the Ozzy episode. And we had him back for our discussion of East of Eden, and it is a very great book. You feel the time, you feel the characters. This character, Kathy Trask, will forever stay with me. She gave me the idea of, hey, how about we study psychopaths or maybe sociopaths in literature, because they're so fascinating. But her husband was just as fascinating, Adam Trask, and what a great story that is. It's a commitment. It's a big one. It's a big book, but it's great.
You won't be disappointed. Yeah.
Yes. And there's so many characters. Mr. Lee is in and of himself. There could be so much discussion just about this character that is in that book. I highly recommend that you go back, if you haven't, to see the Steinbeck week. We also cover Of Mice and Men. Okay. Well, that leads us to movies. What was I can't say your favorite movie.
Right.
Maybe the different question is, what movie stood out to you as powerful for a teacher to see?
I think Conrack, the film that starred John Voight, John Voight portrayed this teacher by the name of, I believe it was his first name, John Conrad. I can't remember his first name right now, but Conrad was the name of his last name, but the kids called him Conrack because they couldn't pronounce Conrad. And so this is a film based on this true story, and so of his teacher in the South, right, off of an island, and he's teaching these children just typical, I think the grades he taught were like from 4th to 8th grade, and maths, all the subjects, right? Because there's only like 2 classroom schoolhouse, and he was teaching half the kids, the older kids. And so what I got out of it, Ruben, was that he really loved those kids, and he not only spent time with them there on the campus or on the school, but he took them places to let them see other, how other people lived, and to show them what was Halloween. There's a scene where they're brushing their teeth. He's teaching them hygiene. And I bring all that out because someone told me this once, and I think it's so true that, the lessons that we teach are important, but those times we spend with those kids, those conversations we have with them, even teaching like Conrad did hygiene, those kids will remember that, because this is a person who taught real life lessons, but he did it with a smile and a heart, and even them remembering music, because he played them classical music. One of my favorite scenes is towards the end of the film where they're playing the music for him, and they're enjoying it, and he's understanding that, wow, they got that. And I think that as a teacher, it just really inspired me to remember that, every conversation I have is important. Everyone I do. This week, there was a young lady who wrote a poem, and I thought to say, oh, it's good. But I looked at her, I said, and it really is truly an amazing poem. I go, that was an amazing, I made a big deal of it because it really was amazing, but I really wanted her to know that was special. And she just looked at me, she goes, oh, I'm so, thank you. And I thought, you know what? I got to do that more often, because sometimes I'll say, oh, great. But I got to go overboard sometimes, because a lot of times it is, it is worthy of the praise that it deserves. So it just reminded me of that. I thought about Conrad this last week. So yes, that movie really touched me, and I just enjoyed it, Ruben.
That was a really good movie. I agree with you. And the power of it, in addition to what you're saying, is for me anyway, was that he wasn't above the content. He wasn't the personality that overwhelms what you're teaching, where they follow him mindlessly. But he loved his subjects as well. He cared. He turned it into games. He turned it into quizzes, but pop quizzes and games, and spending time with them out in the forest. He really cared about those kids, and enough to where he took concern for a particular kid who might have looked like she was being groomed for abuse by one of the educators, or I'm forgetting, it's been a while, but this was somebody who was really empathetic to the plight of these students, but wasn't above them. They weren't beneath him, and he didn't treat them like that. So a movie I would recommend, and there's a lot there, is the Indian film translated to Little Stars on Earth by Amir Khan. And I point out a few things. One of them is that there's a real powerful scene of the parents of this child who just struggles with possibly a learning disability. He's not at his grade level in math, nor in language arts, and he is just struggling along. And you see the struggle of their parents, the pain of his parents, and it just reminds you, you know what? Your student who perhaps you're not getting along with, or you can't get through, parents. There's some parents out there that love him. There's somebody who loves him, or her. And then this teacher who takes interest in him, or eventually works with him, he does a couple of things that are really great. He grabs their attention through a mask and through a little dance. He knows how to get their attention to focus on the lesson. And he does something that is very basic. Come on, this is so basic. Everybody knows this. No, he pays attention and reads and assesses the work of this student. By knowing where he makes mistakes, he can address the problem. He could also see the strengths. He sees the needs, he sees the strengths, and he could work with them as an individual. And it takes a little bit of work, but you get a lot out of it. And plus the fact that the movie was so good and entertaining, didn't hurt as well. So that's my pick. But I do got to say, I got to throw in Koko Yaiku, the Japanese documentary about baseball players, high school baseball players, because there is a scene in there that still resonates with me. And it's the scene of a Japanese coach reflecting on the loss and asking himself, what did I do wrong? How can I improve? Why did I not motivate my students enough? Because if you do that as a teacher, you will get better. You will get better and better, and look for, holes in your teaching or in your communication abilities. It is a really good documentary, so I recommend that as well. So overall, a good year, and thank you for being with us, everybody, along the way.
Yes.
We recommend these episodes and others, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.